The Raven Guard is an ancient and esteemed chapter of the Adeptus Astartes. This primogenitor chapter traces its origins back to the era of the Horus heresy, when they were a legion led by Primarch Corvus Corax. After the bloody battles, the number of space marines greatly diminished, and even before the legions were divided into chapters, they had a rather limited contingent. However, this did not prevent them from engaging actively on various theatre of war and conducting successful covert operations and daring sabotage missions behind enemy lines. Today, we will discuss this glorious chapter in more detail, delving into their homeworld, the Ravenspire, the structure and command of their companies, their distinctive traits, and of course examine their current composition and the integration of Primaris Marines in the 42nd millennium at the time of the Indomitus Crusade. The Raven Guard are masters of the unseen war, often achieving covertly what others can only achieve through bold and force-intensive assaults. For the Sons of Corax, ferocious frontal attacks signify the culmination rather than the beginning of an operation. By the time open battle commences, the enemies of the Raven Guard are already in disarray, their leaders slain, their fortifications destroyed, and their supply lines ablaze under smoke-shrouded skies. From its founding, the Raven Guard has been a force more subtle in its application than its Astartes brethren of other chapters. The warriors lacked neither the splendor and grandeur of the Ultramarines and Blood Angels, nor the overt power of the Imperial Fists. Even during the Great Crusade, while other legions shone as bright symbols of unity and conquest, the Raven Guard was the Emperor's hidden hand, tracking its enemies from the shadows beyond the ever-expanding light of terror. Thus was formed the Raven Guard's style of warfare, a style that has not greatly changed over 10,000 years. Covert assassinations, crippling raids, and disorientation are their primary weapons. The claws sink into the unprotected underbelly of the enemy when he clumsily meets an already vanished threat. Open combat is like the final blow, delivered only after the prey has been exhausted through merciless strikes from the shadows. More so than most first founding chapters, the Raven Guard is shaped by the teachings of their Primarch and the legacy of decisions he made thousands of years ago. Much of the chapter's ancient history is lost, buried in the dust of ages. The Raven Guard themselves preserve only those parts of their heritage that can be imparted as teachings and doctrines. These are carefully preserved in stasis-sealed archival vaults deep within the chapter monastery. Nevertheless, for an outsider observer, a cursory glance at the battle brothers of this mysterious chapter is enough to notice the heavy hand of Corax. The genetic heritage of their father is deeply interwoven with the blood of every warrior in the chapter. Physically, while they do not lose any of the standard powers of the Adeptus Astartes, the Raven Guard tend towards a tall and sinewy build. The hand of the Primarch can also be seen in the combat doctrines and fighting styles key to the Raven Guard's approach to warfare. Through the tripartite path, honed by the chapter over millennia, the Raven Guard strives to master the disciplines of vigilant precision, sudden ambush, and supernatural stealth. Their veterans invariably excel in all these nuances, allowing them to wage war as the supreme predator, striking from a position of advantage to deliver a crippling or lethal blow before the enemy even realizes that the conflict has begun. In the worldview and philosophy of warfare, the Astartes of the chapter are sons of their Primarch. Corax has always been seen as a liberator, a deliverer who inspired not for glory, but rather for the swift and effective overthrow of tyrants and the salvation of the human race. However, it is said that he was introspective, secretive, and less prone to displays of charisma and camaraderie, so natural for some of his brothers. The Raven Guard inherited both the good and the bad from their genetic father, and in the Imperium of the 41st millennium they are regarded as sombre and even odious figures, perceived with both fear and hope. Often possessing sharp facial features and penetrating black eyes, the Astartes inspire an oppressively eerie dread in people. This is further aided by the fact that the battle brothers of the chapter often demonstrate skin so pale that veins are visible beneath it, and their hair is of midnight black colour. There is no doubt that these physical traits reflect those of Corax himself, though the only images that remain of the Primarch exist in stained glass, heroic frescoes or tall sculptures, most often created by those who have never even seen him in person. The nature of the Primarch was filled with sorrowful contemplation even before the weight of pride bore down on his shoulders. This is also inherent in his sons, who are very prone to self-analysis, bordering on self-destruction. In the darkest days of the Horus heresy, when the Legion of the Raven Guard was nearly annihilated by a monstrous act of betrayal, Corax attempted to use sinister genetic alchemy to alter his chapter's gene seed, thereby replenishing his ranks with battle brothers whose development into full Astartes was hyper-accelerated. The results of this act were so disastrous that even the Raven Guard now possess only the most allegorical descriptions of what exactly happened. All other information about the ensuing horror was expunged from their records. But the fact remains, tragic and incontrovertible, that the gene seed of the chapter is far from stable. It is for this reason that the Raven Guard are forced to recruit with a deliberate caution that often leaves them underprepared and dangerously under strength. Yet, this never kept the Raven Guard from fulfilling their duty, instead driving them to hone their skills as shadow warriors. So they get closer and closer to perfection to punish their enemies in unequal fights. Rapid strikes from the air, cunning reconnaissance operations and deadly ambushes. Some even feel the icy hand of long-gone battle brothers on their shoulder, urging them to greater efforts in the endless war for humanity's besieged souls, to forge a golden future that will lend meaning to the sacrifices of the past. The Space Marines hear the whisper of the fallen, as once did Corax, and the longer they shun the light, the louder these voices become. Whether these voices of the fallen are real or imagined matters not. They demand a future that cannot be, for war is the only eternal constant of the galaxy. Nevertheless, they serve to lead the chapter forward. The Raven Guard advances further into the grim age of the Indomitus, hunting the enemies of humanity as only they can. However mysterious and hidden the Raven Guardsmen might be, their righteous intentions are rarely questioned by allies. Their shadows hide the brightest shard of the Emperor's light, giving purpose to their endeavours and hope to those for whom they fight. Never has this beacon been so needed as among the horrors of the Imperium Nihilus. Across countless worlds, a new saying has arisen, whispered as fervently as any prayer. Look upon the shadows not with fear, but with hope. And only when the threat to humanity has passed, only then can the chapter lay down its burden and disappear into the shadows one last time. The homeworld of the Raven Guard is a moon named Deliverance, which orbits the forge world of Kiavar. Nowadays a rare bastion of salvation from the horrors of the galaxy, Deliverance was once known as Lycaeus, a prison moon, whose enslaved populace toiled under the tyrannical rule of the tech guilds of Kiavar. Kiavar and its moon Deliverance are the only shining jewels in this bleak desert of space. Yet this does not stop the bold or foolish enemies from seeking out the home system of the Raven Guard and beginning raids on it. Kiavar is filled with industrial riches and a growing population, while Raban and Rubar serve only the gas mining and processing factories that fester in their upper atmosphere. The Raven Guard shows no mercy to those who invade. To Lycaeus were sent not just criminals and dissenters, but all citizens who fell into the hands of the guild masters or failed to meet the quotas set by Kiavar for extraction. Condemned to labour in the force domes on the airless surface of the moon, or imprisoned in the dark depths of its mineral mines, they were outcasts who never returned to peaceful life. But when the infant Corvus Corax was discovered beneath the icy surface of Lycaeus, the fate of his people was forever changed. Sensing something wondrous in their discovery, the slaves of Lyceum secretly raised the young Primarch, naming him the Deliverer. When Corax swiftly reached his pinnacle, the name proved fitting for his deeds. He led the uprising campaign, which overthrew the hated rulers of Kiavar and once and for all crippled the power of the techno-guilds. Subsequently, Kiavar kneeled before the expanding Imperium, and Lycaeus was renamed Deliverance in honor of Corax. Personally visited by the Emperor of Mankind, Corax learned of his true nature as a Primarch, and was given command of the Raven Guard Legion, created in his image and likeness. The Dark Tower on Deliverance, where the overseers from Kievar were once housed, was expropriated by Corax, renaming it the Raven Spire. Thus, the Raven Guard finally found a home beyond the endless void, a home they have guarded for 10,000 years. Unlike many chapters, the Raven Guard maintains close ties with the peoples from which it recruits its warriors. The chapter has long relied on the technological resources of Kievar and Deliverance, adapting many standard template constructs according to their needs. Such defense guarantees that any force invading Deliverance will pay a high price in their blood. This is fortunate, as the Fossar sector, where the Raven Guard's fortress stands, has faced many threats from the orcs of Wa. The danger only grew since the opening of the Great Rift, and the need for vigilance has never been higher. The Raven Spire is the fortress monastery of the Raven Guard. Its high spires form the imposing fortress befitting life in the Segmentum Tempestus. And yet, when Corax first laid claim to this venerable castle, he discovered its defences were rotten and neglected. Relying on tribute from surviving adepts of the techno-guilds and a new influx of imperial resources, Corax recreated the Raven Spire as an impregnable bastion bristling with weapons, capable of defeating a small military fleet. The fortress became not just a declaration of military power, it became a symbol of hope that Corax brought to the Kievar system, a hope that characterizes the very essence of the Raven Guard. Alas, with the vicissitudes of millennia, this hope has waned, just as Corax himself has almost become a legend. And the appearance of the Raven Spire reflects this malaise. Its redoubts remain inviolable, but their grandeur has dimmed. Towers that once shone like silver now stand rusted and grim, and their cavernous halls and training grounds, once used by thousands of battle brothers, now seldom contain more than a few hundred. Entire sections of the Raven Spire are covered in dust or sealed off. They are patrolled only by servitors in robes, whose bionic limbs scrape along the corridors like a warrior's death rattle. Walking through such places, you feel the presence of something distant and immeasurably greater than yourself. Doors open and close, seemingly without command, lit by the dim light of the sanctuary, as if torn from darkness. This revives rumours that the fortress itself is more than just living. Its functions governed by some ancient and mysterious machine spirit, born from dark antiquity. But to regard the Raven Spire as a decaying relic of better days would be foolish. Its dulled walls are as sturdy as ever, and its gun batteries still promise swift death to anyone who confronts their fury. If the fortress monastery seems outwardly faded, it is because the Raven Guard does not require ostentation and display. Not for them are the gleaming statues soaked in the oil of sagas, or the laudatory honours of other chapters. Functionality is everything, and as a training ground, bastion and vessel of their Primarch's legacy, the Raven Spire fulfills all the tasks necessary for Corax's sons. The highest tower of the Raven Spire is known as the Eyrie. It is on this high tier that Corax arranged his personal quarters, and since the Primarch left the Deliverance, few have dared to enter. For a whole year before his departure, Corax sequestered himself in the Eyrie, seeking atonement for the genetic horror he had unleashed upon his sons. Though seldom mentioned within the Order, after a year he emerged mad, broken by grief and guilt. The legend of the Raven Guard states that Corax ultimately found his redemption in the shifting wastes of the Eye of Terror, but the truth of this story remains unverified. Few possess sufficient authority and courage to disable the stasis fields of the Eyrie and walk its dusty halls, and the lords of the chapter do so only in moments of utmost need, hoping to commune with the echo of the departed Corax's spirit. It is impossible to say whether such an echo remains, but all agree that an unseen presence seems to fill the Eyrie. Of the guidance they receive, not one petitioner speaks. They also do not recount the contents of the parchments scattered throughout the main chamber of the Eyrie, saying only that they are inscribed with thick black characters, which become more indistinct as the lines themselves grow less coherent in meaning. In the labyrinth of mining tunnels, deep beneath the Raven Spire, lies an old apothecarian from the time of the Horus heresy. unknown to all except the most experienced brothers of the chapter, and untouched by anyone without the special permission of the chapter master. It was here that Corvus Corax's attempts to expedite the revival of his shattered legion reached their utter failure, giving birth to mutated monsters devoid of reason. When the Primarch finally realized the dreadful depth of his arrogance, he ordered the Apothecarian to be abandoned and forbade any further experiments. Then he entered the forbidden bounds alone and personally granted the Emperor's mercy to each space marine created by his mistake. Little is known about this time, as Corax ordered all records to be destroyed, but it is said that he emerged from his last visit there a changed being, as if a piece of his burdened soul was torn out for every wretched creature he had killed. As for the Apothecarian itself, its rooms were cleansed with Promethean fire, the doors sealed, and a new Apothecarian block was built in the higher halls of the Raven Spire. Nevertheless, the psychic consequences of the Primarch's actions linger in the old building, a stain of torment and betrayal, unveiling dark circumstances beyond the veil of reality. On the long moonlit nights when the liberation reaches its annual apex over Kiavar, the bestial howl echoes through the tunnels of the old Apothecarian, and the veterans of the Raven Guard's first company guard its doors. Since the earliest days of the Raven Guard, some of the brothers have been prone to a peculiar form of battle frenzy, a cold-blooded resolve to fight on, disregarding self-preservation, along with an inability to distinguish the whispers of the dead from the words of the living. That this is a manifestation of Corax's defective gene seed seems very likely, given its coincidence with the eyes darkening to an inky, impenetrable black, reflecting the traits of the Primarch himself. Furthermore, the obvious resemblance to the Primarch's behavior on his final journey to rid himself of past sins cannot be overlooked. Over time, this madness became known as the Sable Brand. The effects of the Sable Brand are not always permanent, and some battle brothers who have felt its touch and survived the carnage find their symptoms vanish, but for many, the desire to kill remains obsessive. During the Great Crusade, Corax formed from the detained shadow assassins and strike forces, whose roads sold by death would still serve the Emperor's cause. However, after the near-total annihilation of his legion at Istvan V, the Primarch no longer approved of the wasteful use of his warriors. Thus, he systematized his tactical doctrines into the trifold path of shadow, martial axioms that a possessed must adhere to in order to contain the madness of the Sable Brand. The endeavors of Corax resulted in only partial success, whereas the structure of trifold path of shadow led to fewer battle brothers falling to the Sable Brand. Those who now succumb rarely emerge from their spectral state. If the possessed are not slain in battle, they shall be confined within the Raven Spire, where they will be subjected to experiments and dissections until the apothecaries of the chapter find a way to fully purge the gene seed of the Sable Brand. This activity is carried out in the deepest secrecy, for the terrible price of genetic intervention has blighted the Raven Guard for millennia, and many see such methods as a return to the arrogance of the past. Despite their isolationism, the Raven Guard relies on the wisdom of the Codex Astartes primarily for the formation of their organizational structure. Where some Primarchs viewed this great treatise of Robert Gilliman with suspicion, Corax swiftly adopted its teachings, seeing them as a means through which his diminished legion could still thrive. This was a decision that is still respected to this day. Few chapters, aside from the Ultramarines, follow the directives of the Codex more closely than the Raven Guard. Refusing even the amendments of the path of the aspirant through reserve companies that some other chapters have adopted over the millennia, the Raven Guard upholds Gilliman's template in pristine form, making exceptions only in times of great necessity. According to the Codex, the Raven Guard is divided into 10 companies, each officially consisting of 100 battle brothers and led by a commander known as a Shadow Captain. These forces are complemented by the chapter's specialist warriors, apothecaries, chaplains, librarians, and the venerable battle machines of the armory. The Lord of the Raven Guard, the chapter master, is traditionally known under the ancient title of Master of Shadows. Accustomed to realistically understanding their limited resources, the Raven Guard rarely utilizes the might of an entire company. More often they rely on autonomous, rapidly moving strike forces known as Talons, which may consist of only 1 or 2 squads and support assault engines. Thus dispersed, a single Raven Guard company can conduct operations across multi-planet war zones, their warriors sowing chaos from the shadows before regrouping to deliver the final fatal strike. The flexibility of these Talons allows the Raven Guard to quickly amalgamate their assets, forming larger squads as needed, which can also be rapidly disbanded when new objectives arise. Such redistribution happens so swiftly that enemies tend to overestimate the numbers of the Raven Guard. This misjudgment is exacerbated by the chapter's tradition of altering their heraldry on the battlefield to sow confusion and conceal the true disposition of their forces. Despite the mobility and deployment of the Raven Guard, the structure of the company occupies a central place in how the chapter distributes its resources, and each company is formed in accordance with the patterns set by the Codex Astartes. Therefore, the first company of the Raven Guard consists of the most experienced warriors of the chapter, known as veterans, who have won victories for decades or even centuries of relentless wars. Just as one battle brother of the Raven Guard is worth a dozen lesser fighters, it is asserted that a veteran of the first company is equal to many less experienced battle brothers. Accordingly, they are most often deployed squad by squad to reinforce the operations of other companies. From the 2nd to the 5th are the chapter's battle companies. They include a versatile combination of squads for line, close, and long-range fire support, providing each shadow captain a wide range of tactical tools, whether deploying their full battle company to war or dividing their forces into smaller, more specialized units to adequately respond to threats of various kinds. As befits a chapter that has dedicated itself to rapid stealth warfare, the Primaris Space Marines from the battle companies of the Raven Guard often go into battle in Phobos armor. Its lighter design provides maximum maneuverability, and a new power source achieves almost complete silence. Taking into account the chapter's long-standing preferences for the Mk6 Corvus power armor with its distinctive beak-like helmets, the prevalence of Phobos armor requires it to be modified to give the warriors of the Raven Guard battle companies a streamlined, predatory look. As with all chapters that follow the Codex Astartes, from the 6th to the 9th companies are reserved for the Raven Guard. It is these brethren who are tasked with reinforcing the battle companies, whose ranks are depleted during strike operations. Except in the most notable cases, a neophyte, elevated to the rank of a full-fledged battle brother, will pass through each reserve company, mastering tactics and weapon skills with which he will one day be called into a battle company. Fighting in the fire support squads of the 9th Company, he absorbs the commandments, the prioritization of targets, and how to use heavy weapons in the name of the Emperor. In the close combat conditions of the 8th Company's support squads, he learns to direct his fury to more effectively crush the enemy in close quarters. By the time a battle brother passes through the tactical reserve of the 7th and 6th Companies, he acquires all the individual skills required of a Space Marine. All that remains is to hone and temper them, balancing firepower with fury as each situation demands. The 10th Company is where Battle Brothers neophytes are first trained in the traditions and combat doctrines of their chapter. Compared to equivalents in other chapters, the 10th Company of the Raven Guard is distinguished by the lengthy period of service that candidates must complete before moving to the reserve companies. Known as the Subtle, the warriors of the 10th Company may spend over 10 years practicing the art of infiltration and sabotage until they are ready to don the black carapace. This company also serves as the advanced reconnaissance and strike formation of the Order, as it is here that 100 Vanguard Primaris warriors are stationed, ready to strike at the enemies of the chapter. The prolonged training in the 10th Company also serves a further purpose. Given the limited reserves of the Raven Guard's gene seed, the command studies each new recruit, seeking to select only the best. The Raven Guard can afford to invest time only in the finest individuals. The Black Wings, the first company of the Raven Guard, as of the 5th year of the Indomitus Crusade, are the most mighty warriors of the Raven Guard, known primarily for their assassination prowess. Many tyrannical warlords believed themselves securely hidden within the heart of their forces, only to meet a swift death at the hands of the First Company, whose veterans strike as lightning, retreating as quickly as they appear. Among the doctrines of Corax, great importance was placed on the belief that an enemy without a leader is already a defeated enemy. This principle still guides the First Company of the Raven Guard, who have made themselves masters of assassination. Whether they fight as a single squad within a combined formation or are deployed in full strength, the Black Wings aim to decapitate the enemy at the first opportunity. Thus, the First Company directs the Raven Guard's path of war to its very essence, victory by the fastest and most pragmatic means. To assist them in their task, most of the Black Wings brothers prefer combat gear that allows them to move quickly and silently across the battlefield. For the Primaris Space Marines, this often means donning the lighter Phobos armor and trusting their combat instincts to avoid the fiercest of the enemy's attacks. Only when the most steadfast resistance is expected do the Black Wings turn to the tactical dreadnought armor, which they often equip with paired lightning claws to shred the retinue of enemy warlords. Likewise, the First Company more frequently uses fast combat ships rather than heavily armoured ground vehicles. Their missions depend more on speed and surprise than on cumbersome firepower. Indeed, the Black Wings often enter the field with a squadron of gunships, providing flexible aerial support to the black-clad executioners on the ground. Away from the battlefield, the Black Wings carry another duty. They are devoted to secrecy and shame. They are the ones who guard the entrances to the forbidden apothecarian of the Ravenspire on the night of Foreman, carrying a solitary vigil on their shoulders to prevent the bestial combat filling its ancient corridors from gaining physical form. Ascension to the First Company allows the Battle Brothers of the Raven Guard to wear the traditional crystalline symbol of the Space Marine veterans. Besides, the Sons of Corax place no value on outward appearance, avoiding conspicuous signs of rank or privilege, which have no practical use in battle, for the Raven Guard honor is stored in the soul, buried so deep that its shimmer does not attract unwanted attention. When veterans of the First Company join the strike forces formed from other companies of the chapters, they leave their usual department identifiers and instead assume the designation of the unit to which they are attached. For example, veterans helping the Battle Brothers of the Fourth Company under Veteran Sergeant Ascaris will simply be known as members of the chapter of Ascaris and will take on the number of the squad. The Shadowborn, the Second Company of the Raven Guard during the 5th Indomitus Crusade. If the Black Wings are the outstanding assassins of the Raven Guard, then the Shadowborn from the Second Company are the brightest embodiment of the chapter's main skills. To join their number, a Battle Brother must prove his understanding of the subtleties of war as well as its cruelty. He must be knowledgeable in the secret way of shadows and be able to sense the movement of his enemy even under the most difficult conditions. The Battle Brothers of the Second Company are shrouded in shadows, like in a shroud, and can move in complete silence even when clad in armor. However, they must also understand the limits of stealth and know when to abandon the comfort of invisibility in favor of a swift attack. At the right moment, deception must give way to fury and stealth to rage. To the credit of those Shadowborn, such necessity does not always arise. Often, their enemies bleed to death without even noticing their wounds. By this time, the Second Company is already selecting other targets or seizing tactical advantages elsewhere. The Second Company extensively uses two subdivisions of Primaris Reavers and Infiltrators. This allows them to weaken enemy positions before heavier attacks. Such rapid response troops excel at disrupting enemy communications and sabotaging key targets, and those who serve in the Second Company conduct such operations with the highest expertise. The new generation of warriors proved to be so effective that Shadow Captain Aj Solari expressed ambitions to field forces that can operate entirely based on Phobos armoured marines, offering the chapter a second additional vanguard squad alongside the permanent forces in the 10th Company. Whether this will be adopted into the doctrine is still unknown. The Ghost Stalkers, the 3rd Company of the Raven Guard, during the 5th Indomitus Crusade. Compared to other companies of the Raven Guard, the Ghost Stalkers of the 3rd Company are unswerving in thought and deed. Sometimes eschewing the art of distraction and evasion, they rely on sudden and overwhelming force to silence the foe. The core of Corax's doctrine was the trifold path of shadow, often depicted as a trident drawing with a short blade or a lightning-fast 3-taloned claw. Mastering one path, he taught, provided the possibility of victory, mastering two made triumph likely, and fulfilling all three made the enemy's defeat inevitable. From the very beginning, the chapter's battle companies were founded around this tripartite path. The companies from the 3rd to the 5th specialized in a single branch, and a Battle Brothers advancement to the 2nd only occurred when true mastery was achieved. Such promotion was far from guaranteed. Even among Corax's sons, very few could fully replicate his mastery, and many Battle Brothers remain in a single battle company, unmatched in their own path, but never truly able to comprehend the ways of their brethren. The Space Marines of this company strive to master the way of ambush, the most ruthless and uncompromising aspect of Corax's teaching. Thus, they employ fast-moving squads that can encircle and destroy enemy forces one piece at a time, always retreating to strike elsewhere before the inevitable counterstrikes of the enemy. Jump-pack soldiers and land speeder, traditional bulwarks of the 3rd Company, supported by precise attacks of drop pods. Such tactics require a level of boldness rarely seen in other parts of the Raven Guard's closed and contemplative brotherhood. As a result, the ghostly hunters are viewed with a degree of aloofness by the rest of the chapter, which disdains rash and hasty actions of any kind. Nevertheless, following the path of ambush is vitally important precisely because it balances the Raven Guard's tendency towards thoughtful vigilance. This is most evident in those rare instances when the chapter deploys in mass formation. At such times, the 3rd Company inevitably takes the initiative, cutting a bloody furrow through enemy defences for their battle brothers. These fierce clashes with the enemy explain to some extent why the 3rd Company is always under strength, for courage carries a price that must be paid in blood. Nonetheless, it is noteworthy that more Shadow Masters have risen from the Ghost Stalkers than from any other company. In the end, courage is the currency with which humanity's survival is traded. Stealth and vigilance have their place, but some matters can only be settled with the chain blade roaring at the enemy's throat. The silent, the 4th Company of the Raven Guard, as of the time of the 5th Indomitus Crusade. Stealth is the second aspect of the trifold path of shadow, revered above all others by the Battle Brothers of the 4th Company. All Raven Guard Space Marines are trained to move stealthily, using every shadow to their advantage as they silently approach the enemy. However, the warriors of the 4th Company take these skills to the extreme. Known as the Silent, they exist in the spaces between sounds, becoming one with the environment in which they hunt. They draw inspiration from the tales of their Primarch, who, it is said, could remain unnoticed even in plain sight if he wished. Such gifts are not available even to the most devoted sons of Corax. But the Silent come closest to the supernatural abilities of their forebear. Therefore, the Silent are thoughtful and methodical in their approach to battle, deeming it paramount. Their squads are typically deployed in campaigns that were from the beginning long and arduous, where positioning matters more than mere fury. After deployment, the Silent penetrate deep behind enemy lines, carrying out precise operations of sabotage and destruction that make the enemy's resolve waver. It falls to other companies to finish what they have started. True to their name, the Silent do not utter a word in battle. They attack without a battle cry and do not use any verbal commands or vox chats that could betray their presence. Instead, orders and warnings are passed either through encoded vox picts or gestures. Both methods use Courseback, a secret language once used by the rebels of Deliverance in Corax's time. When the fight is finished, the ghosts depart just as silently, taking their dead and leaving no trace of their attack, save for the corpses of their enemies. The Silent specialize in infantry warfare, as their stealthy approach to battle leaves little room for armoured assault. While all Raven Guard transports and their battle tanks are modified to muffle the roar of their engines, such improvements are still far from perfect. Tracks left by ground vehicles are difficult to hide. When armoured vehicles are used by the 4th Company, they usually serve as a diversion. Nevertheless, in response to the shocks of the Indomitus era, the 4th Company has made extensive use of reserves of repulsor tanks, whose anti-gravitational generators mitigate some disadvantages of conventional vehicles. So, when the Silent now go to war, the wrath of repulsor cannons blazes alongside the bolter fire of infantry. The Shadow Captain of the stealthy 4th Company also traditionally doubles as a master of the fleet. Nonetheless, the Pact has proven its worth many times over the millennia. Acting behind enemy lines just as they do, the 4th Company possesses unique capabilities for providing target data for the orbital battle fleet and disabling or destroying defense measures that would otherwise prevent bombardment. The Watchful, the 5th Company of the Raven Guard during the 5th year of the Indomitus Crusade. They watch with the vigilance of the third and final path of the Shadow, considering it the most crucial legacy of their Primarch. In their view, ambush and stealth are empty doctrines if not grounded in ceaseless vigilance. Thus, the 5th Company appears to know every weakness of their enemy. The only flaws hidden from their gaze are their own. Where other Primarchs left scouting to their warriors, Corax often took this duty upon himself to gain a clearer picture of the impending operation. This practice he endeavoured to pass on to his sons. And after the second founding, vigilant reconnaissance became the guiding principle of the 5th Company, subsequently known as the Watchful. From remote observation posts, the warriors of the 5th Company watch over the battlefield with sharp eyesight inherited from their father. Not a single detail escapes their attention, so that enemy scouts aiming at the Watchful might as well do so with weapons in hand, battle cries, and in full height. The Watchful are the only combat companies that fully utilize the mightiest assets of the arsenal in the Raven Guard. Battle tanks and combat suits usually accompany the 5th Company into the theatrics of war. Their fire is directed with supernatural precision, although those unfamiliar with the methods of the 5th Company attribute this extraordinary accuracy to the gift of foresight. The truth is much more mundane. Prolonged study of the enemy exposes his weaknesses and habits. Armed with such knowledge, predicting the movement of the target and evasive actions becomes child's play. If there is a price for following the path of vigilance above any other, it is the propensity to observe but not act, to ponder unfolding events, waiting for the perfect moment for a strike, which may never come. Thus, those absorbed in vigilance begin to reflect the most destructive trait of their Primarch, the obsessive search for answers that cannot be found. Fortunately, some battle brothers come to the 5th Company only after serving in the 3rd or 4th, bringing with them different relationships to the Triune Path, serving as a counterbalance to the vigilant during their most challenging moments. It is for this reason that the 5th Company maintains the largest contingent of jump forces in the Raven Guard, apart from the 8th Company, and its Shadow Captain invariably enters battle at their forefront. Not only do such battle brothers manage to reach the most advantageous positions unreachable by foot soldiers, but their presence also reminds the vigilant that the primary duty of the Adeptus Astartes is to act, and that the heart of battle is their spiritual home. Whenever these wars unfold, there comes a moment when the roar of the guns is drowned out by the roar of the jump packs, and the vigilant leave their watch in favour of bloody judgment in close combat. Beyond their combat duties, they bear the responsibility of guarding the Raven Spire, and have the honour to perform the ancient ritual duty that watches for the possible return of Corax. An individual battle brother from the 5th Company has performed this mournful duty every day since the Primarch's disappearance. Even during the galactic upheavals of the Black Crusades, and even while defending their own Kiavar system against the Tyranids and Orcs. The fact that the vigil of the 5th Company has lasted 10,000 years without response holds no meaning, for its purpose transcends tangible need or obedient tradition. It has turned into a flame of hope, shielded from the galaxy's suffocating despair by a single unwavering guardian. The Darkened Blades, the Sixth Company of the Raven Guard. The Sixth Company has the honor of continuing the Primarch's coveted fight against tyranny, to destroy the ambitious plans of despots, demagogues and false prophets who would shackle humanity with the chains of enslavement. Of all the companies in the chapter, the Sixth is typically the most itinerant, operating far beyond the bright glow of the Astronomicon. In most chapters, reserve companies primarily exist to replenish losses of combat companies in campaigns and rarely receive their own objectives. This is not the case with the Raven Guard, whose exhaustive selection process prepares reservists who can fight on many theatres of war, on par with their combat company brethren, and even deploy as such. Such is the case with the Sixth Company, the Darkened Blades, whose ongoing mission is to penetrate enslaved worlds and return them to the Imperial fold. Tyrants take various forms. Some planetary rulers are too callous or greedy to govern in the interests of their people. Others succumb to the temptations of chaos, the insidious whisper of gin-stealers' cults, or the false promises of the Tao. The Darkened Blades make no distinction among them, for all these maladies have a common cure. Like parasites on a living host, they must be ripped out of the worlds they afflict and thrown into the purifying flame, to serve as a lesson to any who would follow a similar path. The precise means of liberation vary from world to world. If the decay is centralized, the Darkened Blades use lightning-fast attacks common to the Adeptus Astartes, amassing overwhelming force against an unprepared enemy. However, more often, oppression is of an endemic nature, and they must confront it on a continental or even planetary scale. In such cases, the Sixth Company splits into squads and conducts rapid guerrilla actions to optimally use their limited numbers. Meanwhile, local resistance forces are trained in those aspects of the shadow arts that can be comprehended by any Imperial citizen, so that they might support the operation of the Raven Guard and contribute to their own liberation. The Raven Guard cannot dwell in peace indefinitely, and their ambition is to prepare the liberated populace to fend for themselves. Even after the tyrant's banners are torn down and the Emperor's rule restored, the Darkened Blades vanish, moving on to other oppressed worlds, never pausing to revel in their victory. There is always a demand for their prowess elsewhere. Since the unveiling of the Great Rift, countless Imperial worlds have fallen into the clutches of tyrants and renegades, leaving the Raven Guard's Sixth Company in a perpetual state of war. The Whisperclaws excel in executing straightforward attack-retreat maneuvers, adhering to a mobile and responsive combat doctrine. The warriors of the Seventh Company frequently employ land speeders and other aerial assets from the chapter's arsenal, catching their foe off guard with swift strikes. Corax taught that speed and stealth are often interchangeable. What does it matter if the enemy is taken by surprise by an attack from hiding or by one so rapid it cannot be countered? Preferring the latter, the units of Whispering Talons often operate ahead of the main strike force, seizing potential targets and executing complex strategies that annihilate the enemy. On the rare occasions when the Raven Guard fights as one, the Seventh Company is often found fighting alongside the Battle Brothers neophytes and the Primaris Vanguard specialists of the 10th Company, forming elite assault forces that capture strategic points and cripple the enemy's supply lines. This cohesion is maintained even in smaller engagements, where advanced scout units employ a mix of sabotage, assassination and ambush to clear a direct path for the warriors of the Seventh Company, who then strike like a spear to the heart of the enemy. So close is the combat bond between the two companies that some veterans of the Whispering Talons forego progression into battle companies and instead return to the 10th, serving as mentors and instructors. In keeping with the tenets of both the Codex Astartes and Corax himself, the Raven Guard frequently utilizes various heraldic symbols on their warriors' armor. While line units typically display the Codex-approved arrow somewhere on their right shoulder pad, this company, more than any other, thoroughly alters the ways in which identification marks and squad numbers are displayed, thereby misleading their enemy. According to Raven Guard tradition, each company of the chapter was named by Corax himself. If so, the designation of the 8th Company hints at an ironic humour rarely exhibited by the Primarch. The unseen are not visible on the battlefield until they choose to reveal themselves, their presence scarcely unnoticed, as little can match the roar of a jump-pack assault for their enemy. The 8th Company serves as the Raven Guard's reserve of immediate support. But in line with the chapter's principles, its squads often fight in their own detachments, just as they support the battle companies. Just as in most chapters, the tenure of a battle brother in the assault reserve is deemed a necessary but temporary part of his training. The honing of close combat skills must be completed before proceeding to their development in the 7th and 6th Companies. There have been instances where the battle brothers of the Raven Guard remained amongst the unseen until they received the Emperor's grace. It cannot be denied that the genetic sons of Corax share his preference for entering the battlefield on the fiery wings of a jump pack, making it unsurprising that many brothers find success during their time in the 8th. The battle doctrines of the Raven Guard rely more on speed and maneuverability than on punitive force. As a result, their strikes are lethally quick and brutally precise, slicing through the defences of their enemies by the path of least resistance to find and pierce the heart of the enemy army. When the punitive fire of the offensive is supported by Primaris Inceptors, few can withstand such onslaught. The unseen prefer to use jump packs to quickly engage in combat, often deploying directly from the assault bays of passing Thunderhawk gunships. Traditionally, these jump packs undergo extensive modifications not to mute their throaty roar, but rather to modulate it, to mimic the hunting cries of the Kiavar's birds. The entry into battle of the unseen is heralded by a piercing cry like some monstrous and devilish choir, an aphonia that penetrates the enemy to the very marrow. Justifying this strange rite, the 8th Company asserts that their speed and ferocity afford them ample initiative. However, the company suffers from the worst casualty rates in the chapter, and concerned voices have been raised more than once, criticising their combat methods. Nonetheless, the unseen fiercely guard their traditions, reminding critics that dead eyes see little and lifeless tongues offer no warnings. The dirge singers are named in honour of the mystics of Kiavar and Deliverance, who weave secret hymns for those about to die. The 9th Company is the reserve company for fire support of the Raven Guard. It is here that the majority of recruits come after completing their gruelling training in the ranks of the 10th Company, taking on the responsibilities of a full battle brother for the first time and honing their skills with the countless long-range weapons of the chapter. To the dirge singers, fallen warriors placed within dreadnoughts often join in battle. These ancient heroes of the Raven Guard offer their wisdom and strategic experience to the living battle brothers. The dreadnoughts, fighting alongside the dirge singers, bring more than just their heavy armament. They offer support to their brothers and serve as a bastion of resolve, even in the most challenging moments. Dreadnoughts hold great respect within the 9th, and they sometimes act as battlefield officers. The 9th operates formations known as the Chorus, in which dreadnoughts, Stormraven gunships and fire support squads act together to deliver swift and punishing firepower to any point upon the battlefield. Such tactics brought the 9th Company many victories, often against such overwhelming numbers of opponents that Adeptus Terra advised against engaging. Indeed, during the siege of Cantarell, a strike force from 3 squads of the 9th Company held 10 leagues of coastline against the D Blood Flag pirates, redeploying to counter each attack whenever the roar announced that an Orc dropship was approaching the quay. The dirge singers paid a high price, losing half their number to death or injury, but their sacrifice delayed the Orcs' advance long enough for the Talon 293rd Regiment and the Fire Lord's chapter to defend the second line of defence, ultimately preserving the tech vaults of Cantarella from desecration by the Xenos. Shadow Captain Vos de Lorne, commander of the 9th and known for being a restrained traditionalist, is the only high-ranking officer in the chapter who resists the growing presence of Primaris Marines among his squads, and is likely to continue doing so until a formation as effective as the Chorus emerges from the turbulent potentials offered by genetic sorcery. To his peers' dismay, DeLorme is infamously known for keeping a close watch on Primaris brothers and reportedly applies absurdly rigorous standards to their combat operations. Such bias is a deviation from the norm at a time when even the most stubborn commanders of the chapter are quickly adapting to the presence of Primaris Space Marines within their ranks. Nonetheless, DeLorme's stubbornness is not without its benefits. By the time Primaris Marines of the Raven Guard leave his company, their skill and resolve in combat are almost unmatched. The 10th Company is the place where all initiates of the Raven Guard are first trained and scrutinized by the commanders of the chapter. The art of stealth, honed during service in the 10th Company, stays with a recruit throughout many years of war, shaping him into a true son of Corax in character and deeds, as well as in flesh and blood. The Raven Guard primarily recruits from the regions of Kiavar, where the name of Corax is a legend. Therefore, being called to serve in the Raven Spire is a great honor, though for many this calling ends in death before the gift of the gene seed can be received. With its gene seed tarnished in past millennia, the chapter takes no chances on those who merely express a desire. Before being granted the gene seed of Corax, a neophyte must undergo countless trials in the redemption pods and through the unwelcoming wastes of Kiavar. To receive the gene seed means to carry the future of the chapter in one's own flesh and to understand the rarity and honor of this burden. And yet, it is but one step along the tortuous and perilous road, for the Raven Guard expects relentless service from its neophytes. The contingents of the 10th Company, known as the Pinions, are often deployed at the very heart of major strike forces and operate in close cooperation with the battle companies as specialists in infiltration and reconnaissance. Known as the Unseen, the scout squads of the 10th Company prowl behind enemy lines, transmitting vulnerabilities to the Strike Force Command, providing reconnaissance that can influence the fate of the conflict. Such missions are an important proving ground for those who seek to master the art of shadow. Only under the watchful gaze of the enemy can one truly test their stealth. Only within earshot of vigilant sentinels can a warrior learn to move without sound. This is a trial by fire for the trainee warriors, who rush into war on bikes or aboard land speeders to keep pace with their elite brethren to appear in the deadliest of situations. For those who survive, such joint operations are the main source of skill enhancement and can even become the final rite of initiation before a neophyte achieves the full status of a battle brother. When this long-awaited goal is reached, it marks a time of dark celebration for both the neophytes and those who trained them. However, such rites are brief, for the Raven Guard does not endorse the excessive glorification of personal achievements. Alongside the scout squads of the 10th Company, there exist permanent squads of Space Marines, specialists clad in Phobos armor, including Reavers, Suppressors, Incursors and Infiltrators. Killing enemy commanders, jamming communication networks, and sabotaging the infrastructure of the foe, these vanguard warriors strive to impair the very ability of the enemy to wage war. Only after their victims have been weakened does the vanguard strike openly, unleashing all their lethal force. A strike that leaves the enemies of the Raven Guard lying as carrion for crows. The vanguard elements of the 10th Company are so valued that full details of their whereabouts are usually known only to their shadow captain and the Master of Shadows himself, for in secrecy lies strength. Led by the Master of Shadows, the commander of the Raven Guard is entrusted with organizing the combat might of the Raven Spire, upholding the teachings of Corax, and guarding the precious gene seed of their chapter. The Lords of the Raven Guard act with even greater autonomy than their counterparts in many other chapters. While the word of the Master of Shadows is sacrosanct, those who serve under his command are advised to act on their own initiative until such a word is given. Some chapters might consider this unconventional approach a step towards anarchy, but it has served the Raven Guard well throughout all 10 millennia. Where other forces might feel a collapse after the death of their leader, the Raven Guard always has another among its self-sufficient shadow captains ready to take up the mantle of command. This philosophy extends throughout the entire command structure of the Raven Guard, Chaplains, librarians, and tech marines must act intuitively in combat, guided by experience and instinct, as once did Corax himself. Necessity ensures that a strike team rarely enters combat without the spiritual guidance of a chaplain or the skills of a tech marine to soothe a wounded machine. Yet, the precise details of such arrangements are seldom imposed from above. Only apothecaries are formally appointed. In light of the chapter's stormy past, all efforts are made to preserve the remaining stocks of gene seed, extracting the progenoid glands of the honoured dead. The Raven Guard maintains a somewhat larger cadre of apothecaries, to ensure that when a battle brother falls, the metallic drills of the reductor are never too far away for extracting the gene seed. Although in theory, the Master of Shadows should consult with his shadow captains and the senior members of the Reclusium, Librarius, Apothecarian, and the Armory, in practice, it is rare for all to gather in one place. When Kayvan Shrike called a conclave, bringing together his battle brothers scattered across the entire Imperium, it was the first such meeting held in the grim halls of the Ravenspire in nearly 2 centuries. The Raven Guard, by their nature, are as restless as any fleet-based chapter, and their leaders are little inclined to talk. Nevertheless, in their purpose, the Raven Guard remains as cohesive a brotherhood as any that can be found across the battling Imperium, bonded not only by the legacy of Corax's flesh, but also by his insatiable desire to see humanity freed from darkness. That they will take every necessary step to accomplish their mission will be no less true for being unspoken. All chapters of the Space Marines have their rituals, accumulated over endless centuries, and the Raven Guard is no exception here. Most of all, the Battle Brothers revere their fallen Primarch and the Emperor himself, a distant and aloof figure, more akin to a stern patriarch than a deity in the traditions of the Raven Guard. Other rituals reflect ceremonies conducted across the Imperium, differing only slightly from those practiced by thousands of warrior cults. But the shadow rituals are unique to the Raven Guard and their successors. Preserved since the time of the Great Crusade, these fragments of mystery and wonder teach that shadow contains both truth and falsehood. The purpose of each rite is to separate one from the other and the flash of truth, otherwise hidden. Truths about their battle brothers, their purpose, or even their enemies. The shadow rituals are conducted in complete silence, using the gestures of Corspake as a form of sign language taught to all members of the Raven Guard. This allows them to communicate on the battlefield without having to risk themselves to exposure by speaking or using Vox technology. Notable signs include the Crow Fane, the Feast of Bones, the Empty Chime, even the Murder Call, which calls for vengeance against the slayer of a great hero. All are conducted without words, their secrets veiled from the uninitiated by cloaks and silence. Observing such rituals is as much a duty of the chapter's shadow captains as it is of their chaplains, for they walk in the shadows no less than the master of secrets of the Raven Spire. Mention of shadow as a prefix to rank signifies a battle brother who has mastered the rituals of the trifold path of shadow and thus holds the deepest connection to the Primarch. No one can rise to the rank of captain without such mastery, yet this title is not in itself a prerequisite. Any battle brother can be granted the status of shadow as soon as his abilities have been proven. Indeed, it is quite common among the squads of the second company, the Shadowborn. These warriors are highly respected by the rest of the chapter, yet hold no privilege. To walk as one with the shadow is a powerful gift, but even in the Raven Guard, it cannot replace proven leadership abilities. At the very heart of the Raven Spire nests the Armory, where the chapter's battle tanks, starships, weapons and power armors are maintained in a state of constant readiness by tech marines and a toiling army of servitors. The Armory Chamber stores both the history and the future of the chapter, and as such, it is a place of immense spiritual significance to the sons of Corax. The Horus Heresy Cataclysm dealt a terrible blow to the combat power of the Raven Guard, depleting not only the ranks of its warriors, but also its arsenal. During the massacre at Istvan V, a horrific amount of the Legion's material and armor was destroyed or lost, forcing the Raven Guard and their successors to rely on older models of armor and weapons for many centuries thereafter. After many years of laborious effort, The manufactories and smiths of Kiev ultimately remedied these deficiencies, but signs of the problem remain. Many of the oldest assets in the armory still bear scars from battles past. Memorial scars of Istvan, Talamos and Karinai are preserved among them all. However, from time to time, such battle damage is partially repaired or compensated for to meet the needs of future wars. Nevertheless, distinctive markings can easily betray equipment trying to hide its true identity. The removal of these historical marks is always a sorrowful task for the masters of the Raven Guard, and it is undertaken with heavy hearts. That the chapter permits this speaks to their belief in pragmatism over pomp. The most ancient war machines of the Raven Guard rarely emerge from the shadows. They are kept in the deepest vaults of the armory and are prepared only in times of dire need when the old spirits awaken to aid the endeavours of the living. The Raven Guard believe that their fallen are not lost forever, but wait in a shadow that light cannot pierce, weighing the deeds and failures of their successors. Bringing the venerable relics of the armory back into the flames of war, the sons of Korax invite their forebears to take note that the cause of the chapter still upholds wars worthy of their legacy. For this reason, the Raven Guard holds the sarcophagus of the dreadnoughts above all other relics. For such marvels allow the honoured dead to fight side by side with the living, even while standing with one foot in the shadow. Despite all its old ghosts, the armory remains a rare hive of activity within the darkness-enshrouded Ravenspire. Each battle brings fresh wounds to the legendary armour that must be restored. The weapons and indomitable plating of war machines must be repaired, and their machine spirits appeased. The battle gear of fallen brothers is meticulously restored, ready to serve their successor in the chapter's endless battle. Thus, the armory blazes with light and fire, even when all else is consumed by silence. The strike of the hammer and the roar of the forge are the recommitment to a war that will never end.